so much for joining in. I hope you were able to participate in the really quick single breath that we took with Parth. And as we go live. So everybody that's joining in, today is International Men's Day. So happy International Men's Day to everybody out there. To all the men out there, everybody that's joining in, welcome. Thank you everybody for being here. I want to really quickly introduce this show and myself. This is your host, Dr. Varun Gandhi. Love and abundance, everybody. This is the universal sign language for love. Thank you everybody for tuning in. This show, What's Your Story, is an exploration of our world. We talk about issues pertaining to the South Asian community, but these issues are not just limited to us. They're shared across all communities. The question is, how can we move the needle on these issues? Through conversations, by talking about it, by learning about it, by reaching out to people who don't look like you and having uncomfortable conversations. You know, we call this the land of the free, but we don't have freedom because we are bound by hate. We're bound by shame, by abuse, by rejection. And these are the issues that we're talking about here today in What's Your Story? So this is our 9th episode. And so far, we have covered topics such as mental health, colorism, yoga appropriation, the Hindu exodus, and women's abuse in South Asian communities across the world. In each of these episodes, we have had panelists from all over the world. For example, in our mental health panel, we had the CEO of the Deepak Chopra Foundation, Punacha, who's based in LA, and works very closely with Deepak Chopra. Other guests have included Kavita from the Dark is Beautiful movement, and Renu Dillon, who is a powerful advocate for women's empowerment, stemming from her experiences with an abusive husband. Thus far, we have had panelists from 3 continents, Asia, Australia, and North America. And I'm sure we'll soon include panelists from South America, Africa, Europe, and maybe a penguin from Antarctica. You know, we cover a wide variety of perspectives for each discussion as we reach an international audience. Our episodes thus far have been watched by more than 50,000 people. So thank you everybody for watching and tuning in. The topics for December are Indian pride and period shaming. Those are the next topics that are coming up. So who am I? I have a background in science. I'm a researcher. I've published several scientific articles in the top environmental engineering journals. But by working as a consultant, I realized that I wasn't making much of a difference because the water quality in America was already so good. I felt like I was just making a 0.2% difference, if that. So I didn't want to do that anymore. And that's when I began exploring outside of my traditional career path. I became interested in storytelling. I read a lot about stories. I read a lot of stories. I realized stories are how we form an understanding of our world. Stories drive our perspectives. So let's take marketing as an example. You know, the best marketing campaigns are those that create a story, like Coke. If you really look at what Coca-Cola is, it's an acidic, sugary compound drink that's really, really bad for us. But Coke, through marketing, has created a story of how it's synonymous to happiness, with the tagline like, open a Coke, open happiness. In fact, Coke has been shown to be a very effective toilet bowl cleaner, but there are many people who drink this every day. Why? Because of the stories that were created. And that's what we're going to cover in today's conversation: stories on men's abuse. So before we get to the panelists, I want to make a few quick announcements. I want everyone to know that this is a safe space. There is no judgment. So please share your experiences or ask your questions without reservation. And also for the audience, if you guys have any questions, ask them at any time, type it into the chat. And as we're going through our discussion, we will have them answered. All right, so on to our panelists. First, we have Isha Inamdar, who by profession is a financial services executive. She has worked in the film and advertising industry, which has helped her grow her creative side, something that she takes full advantage of by pursuing her passion as an art director in her free time. An avid reader that got hooked onto literature at a very young age, she experienced a high when she saw her name on the cover page of her first novel, True Liars. Welcome, Isha. Can you share your journey of writing the book for all of the aspiring authors out there?
Well, thank you, Varun. Thank you for having me here. And it comes to my journey, something I would love to tell any and every aspiring author is it's just very difficult to begin. I think my most difficult time was when I kept deciding when I was going to start writing in its true sense. The story was there in my head, but then, it's uh, tomorrow is when I would start writing, and I kept doing that for a very long time. And I think, it is a lonely job. It is something which keeps you away from people, away from plans, friends, family, everything. But then it's rewarding to see when the journey moves from the Word document to an actual book in your hand. So, just start. Don't think, don't overthink, and you'll have yourself a masterpiece ready.
Wow, very good advice. Thank you so much, Isha. Thank you for joining us. Our second panelist is Parth Savla. He's an entrepreneur, a community organizer, and a speaker. As the founder of the We Source space, Parth finds fulfillment in supporting people to achieve success, fulfillment, and the ability to access their hidden potential. He is the founding member of Boys to Men, an organization that empowers boys in middle school and high school with the help and guidance of male mentors. Parth, welcome. Can you share your journey in this space? And what questions were you asking and what got you interested?
Sure. First of all, Varun, thank you for bringing this all together and creating a platform for being able for us to assure voices in a safe space that isn't normally available. So I really, really appreciate you bringing us together this way. In terms of a quick correction. So I am the founding member of our Northern California chapter of Boys to Men. The Boys to Men USA is the USA level. What got me into this journey a little bit is, so I was born in 1981. I moved here in US in 1984. I'm an only child. My dad always had a full-time job, and my mom always had two jobs. And they did their best that they could do. As a man, as an only child, I think emotionally I developed a little bit later than other people who had brothers and sisters, like how to play and how to connect and all those things. So I think my emotional development occurred a little bit later in terms of that understanding. Secondly, that as guys, as men who go through various levels of conditioning, also physiological understanding, and as a young 13-year-old boy, being really confused, like my dad's not going to tell me how to do certain things, how to operate, how to navigate. And so I sought mentors. And at the same time, as a Indian born US indoctrinated male, the examples that I had were not Indian. They were Caucasian. There were other ways, right? And so it was very confusing to navigate through these spaces. And so now that I've been able to do my work, what I'm really excited about is to be able to share vocabulary. कारण के कभी कभी भाषा नहीं है कैसे हम बात करें अमुक चीज के साथ, like how do we have that deep vocabulary? And so I think sometimes what happens is it's not an issue of anti. I think it's normally an issue of ignorance or an issue of a lack of a dictionary of vocabulary that we can all share and speak. And I think one of the things that I really want to do now, as someone who's approaching 40, which I think many people would think is like old, is how do we create a new dictionary and words so we can have a shared experience as men and women who are also equally confused and have abuse. And it's not our mom and dad's fault, right? It's we're born the way we were born, and we want to ally with each other to make that difference moving forward. So anyway, that's a little bit of my story.
Yeah, you mentioned that we're born the way we're born, but I guess it's up to us and it's our responsibility to kind of take control of, our actions. And, and that's kind of where we are here today. And that brings us to our next panelist, which is Deepika Narayan Bhardwaj, who is an Indian journalist, a documentary filmmaker, and a men's rights activist from New Delhi, India. In times when everyone is emphatically talking about women's rights, Deepika makes a strong case for protection of rights of men, whether it's false accusations or domestic violence or sexual crimes. She has become a prominent voice for men's rights in India after her documentary film, Martyrs of Marriage, which is about abuse of Section 498A, which is the anti-dowry law of the Indian Penal Code, by bribes and their families. The Martyrs of Marriage got a global release on Netflix in 2018, and she has given various TEDx talks bringing to light the injustices faced by men in India and continues to spread awareness around this subject. She's now working on her second documentary feature, India's Sons, which tells tales of men who are falsely accused of rape. Deepika ji, welcome to this panel. And can you share your journey of how you became or came to be a men's rights activist?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Varun, for having me on this panel. Lovely listening to all the people who I'm sharing this platform with today, and indeed, in gratitude, thank you to this webinar today. My journey started about 8 years ago. The trigger was a very personal experience. I experienced it happened in my own family, where a dispute within a marriage, which started very quickly within 3 months of the marriage, and which was.
Hey, sorry, Deepika, I have to cut you off really quickly. I can't hear you. It sounds really low. You started off fine, but then throughout in the middle somewhere it kind of went low. It's still low.
Is it okay now? No.
No.
Am I audible now?
It's still kind of low.
Oh, okay. Every volume at my end is fine. Wait, let me just plug in the earphones again and see if this works. Hi, am I audible now?
Uh,
Am I audible now?
it's
Hello?
hey, it's still kind of low. Not sure why. What's
I don't
going
know
on?
really what to do.
Try unplugging, replugging the cord. I
Is
think
this,
you
does
did.
this work better?
I think. Oh, maybe check your audio settings.
Maybe am I connected to headphones? Oh God. Is this okay? Anything better?
No,
No?
still sounds very
Okay,
distant.
let me get another earphone then. Let me just try it.
All
If
right.
it's fine in the morning webinar, just give me a second. I'm so sorry about
Sure,
that.
sure. No problem. No problem. So while she is getting that, you know what, Parth, I'm going to bring you on. Let's kind of have our first question. You have experience in men's circles, and you have a lot of experience in coaching men. Can you share some of the stories that you've heard that of the abuse that men face, and how does it affect their psyche?
A very good question. So one, thank you for again this panel. I think when we think about the word abuse, it's a very charged word, right? I think it can bring up a lot of things. So I think it's important to have a shared understanding of what the word abuse might be for the sake of this conversation, right? So what is abuse, right? So I just want to take a moment to identify that. When we normally think about abuse, what comes to mind typically is oppression or domination, right?
Mhm.
Abuse.
Mhm.
The dictionary definition of abuse is to misuse or misapply
Mhm.
based on a perception of reality. So again, the dictionary definition of abuse is to misuse or misapply. From my work with men, another dimension of abuse is also added, which is a violation of safety. So things that are unwanted done to you that you don't want done. And abuse happens at a younger age. So to answer your question, with men, we have to start at the boy level. Sometimes there's a lack of vocabulary that's there. So one thing I want to share with you, again, I think there's a very open and very authentic dialogue here that we're having. So in my men's circle work, one of the things that comes up in men's dialogue is, are you circumcised or uncircumcised? Interesting question. So now what occurs is, the South Asian men, predominantly, we are uncircumcised. Okay. So that means that part of our being is very sensitive, different from how an uncircumcised part will operate, right?
Mhm.
Now, here's why I'm mentioning this at a very fundamental level, is that our connection to our physical bodies and how others connect to us in our relationship to our physical bodies is part of this abuse conversation that we're having. Okay. And so one of the things that I've heard often, which is going to be a surprising, I think, fact for many of folks, is as a male, from the uncircumcised sense of things, the 60 to 70% of the men that I've worked with said the first time they had sex was very painful. And 53 to 65% actually cried. of how painful it was.
Wow.
So this is where it begins. We as a society have separated our relationship to our bodies, our sexuality, and our gender. And we've collapsed a sense of role from soul. So then what happens is, you have to do a job, Varun. You have to do a job, Parth. You have to do a job, right? So then now our personalities begin to kind of go disappear in the background, and how we are, what role we can fulfill begins to become the predominant dialogue, on top of a sense of violation. So again, back US, many people that I talk to, guys, sexual experiences a memory of hurt here. Yeah. So then there's a sense of comparison, circumcised, uncircumcised, right? So automatically there's an embedding within a culture of like comparison. I didn't do enough. So then in these very subtle ways, it's not overt, but again, in the work that I do with men, it's these things come through in deeper dialogues, and we cry together. And then the guys say, wow, I've never cried like this before. Because we create a space of safety. And so there's this dimension of not so much overt abuse, but conditioned role play that maybe we didn't prescribe to as guys.
Right.
And as women, right? And it's not your fault, not our fault, right? It's just society. And these are the layers that we're unpacking.
Wow, thank you so much, Parth.
Sure.
That was a very deep response, and yeah, I totally felt that. Hey, Deepika, welcome back.
Any better?
It still sounds kind of low and distant.
Let the conversation join again. I really don't know what more can I do. Is this
Uh,
chance?
Maybe the microphone. Do we select the right microphone and speaker in your audio settings?
Is this better?
There we go. Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. All right.
Yeah. Cool.
So
Okay. It's switched automatically to this webcam. I don't know how, but yeah, that's okay. All right. So
sounds
do I
great.
answer the question that you asked before? Shall
Yes.
we start from there itself?
Please go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, so my journey into the space of men's rights started with a very personal experience. It happened with my own family, where a dispute within the marriage, which had nothing to do with domestic violence or a dowry demand, was made out to be one, and not in just verbal accusations, but in front of the court. And I was appalled that white lies like that could be told in front of the court, and all that you can do is to depose yourself and then prove your innocence. Nobody will care to investigate those claims. Nobody will care to identify if all that has been said in front of the court is truth or not, if that has any relevance or not. But accusations taken on the face value, and then a man and his family gets tried on the basis of those accusations. So this personal experience basically motivated me to do something about it. Since I was a journalism candidate, I'd made documentaries as a journalism student, and I kept making small little documentaries on social issues here and there before this. In my own personal capacity, I decided that I'm going to tell the stories of men who are victims of false accusations of dowry charges and Section 498A of IPC in India, and how their families suffer, and how this law, which was brought with very noble intentions, is being abused, and that abuse is basically serving no purpose that it was intended for, which is to protect women from abuse within marital relationships. That's how my journey started. And initially, it was just about making this documentary and telling people that those who suffered this kind of misuse are not alone. There are a lot of people who commit suicide after being trapped in cases like this. I wanted that to stop. The major reason behind that is people feel very lonely. These men who are cornered from all the sides, have their jobs lost, have the society look down upon them just because they got charged with a case like that. I wanted them to know that they are not alone. There are a lot of people who are suffering like that, and they can fight this and they can deal with this. They do not need to give up on their life because something like this has happened with them. And the idea was to spread awareness that this is an issue that needs attention. It's a serious issue that's harming lives of people who are innocent and being punished for no reason. Then that's how it started. And it's been 8 years. I found that the space has so much uh, uh, to be discussed, to be shared, and to be worked on that I'm still here.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Deepika ji. And I wanted to ask you to share some of the stories that some of the stories that you have come across while you were creating your documentary, the kinds of abuses.
Okay. Martyrs of Marriage essentially is about misuse of Section 498A of Indian Penal Code. It, of course, started with a personal experience, and um, on one evening, while I was still contemplating what to do and what not to do and how to go about it, I came across this suicide video of a man called Syed Ahmad Makhdoom from Bangalore, who was a resident of Canada. He was working in the social justice department over there, came to India to get married, and he got married to somebody who had been married several times earlier, and some that fact was completely hidden from him. But then he let go of that and continued with his marriage and tried to make the best of it. But then after a year, 2 years of his marriage, there were disputes between him and his wife decided to take away the child, the love of Makhdoom's life. And for the rest of his life, until he eventually took his own life, he kept begging to see his own child. He kept begging to have a glimpse of his own child, and he just couldn't bear the alienation. He just couldn't bear the kind of things that was being fed to the kid against him, and he just couldn't bear the separation. He approached courts, he approached police, he wrote several letters, but eventually the system failed him and he took his own life. And that video moved me so much. And his last words to this world was to get justice for him and his son. And that is the story that actually Martyrs of Marriage starts with. This is about documentary. While researching, the documentary took 4 years to make. I met scores and scores of men, women, even kids who become a part of this battle, intentionally or unintentionally, predominantly unintentionally, whether they are accused in cases like this just because of the fact that they are relatives of a man who gets accused by his wife, or they are kids of parents who are fighting this battle amongst themselves and they're just completely divided. So there is Makhdoom, there is Manoj Kumar again, who committed suicide in Bangalore. He was himself a victim of domestic violence. And when he approached the police to basically grant him some protection from the abuse that he was getting from his wife's side, the cops actually laughed on him and sent him off, saying, "We do not have any provision to register your complaint against your wife. But if your wife comes here and complains, then we'll have to take her complaint." And that's exactly what his wife did. The moment she realized that he is gone and he's not coming back and he has gone to the cops to complain against her behavior, she pressed charges of dowry and domestic violence against him and his entire family. And he hanged himself the same night. And this happened while I was shooting Martyrs of Marriage. This was not a case which I had researched upon, or I was going to interview, or I was going to include in my documentary. These kind of cases, I'm telling this because just to make people aware that these cases are so frequent that while I was traveling to Hyderabad to shoot another person's story, while I was in the train, this suicide happened in Bangalore, and we cut our journey short and we went to Bangalore and covered this case while it was happening. Uh, there are endless cases like that, Varun, that are happening in India. Um, uh, 498A misuse has also been given. A lot of people who are listening to this, if they are from India, they would know what 498A is. I'm assuming so, but a lot of people, if they you have an international audience, they would not know. This is a law. This is a law under the Indian Penal Code, which has a 3 years of jail term if you are convicted under it. It criminalizes physical and mental cruelty perpetrated on a woman by her husband or any of his relatives. And even though this is criminalizing physical and mental cruelty, and I think every one of us would understand that within a relationship, whether that is marriage or live-in, uh, anybody can be cruel to anybody. Physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse can be done from a man to a woman, which we predominantly understand, but can be done from a woman on man as well for various reasons and for various behavioral perspectives and anything. But the criminalization in India of this kind of a behavior happens only when it is one sided, which is from a man to a woman. But if a man is a victim of marital abuse, one, he does not have the provision available to him, and two, like it happened in case of Manoj Kumar, if the person approaches authorities to seek some kind of protection or some kind of recourse that he's not harassed like that, the woman can go and file a contra complaint or a counter complaint against him and then implicate his entire family. And then from a victim, he becomes an accused, and then he has to fight to prove his innocence. And the worst thing is, unlike in Western countries, where if you initiate a false litigation and if you falsely accuse somebody, if that person proves their innocence, then you have to bear the legal cost, the person gets compensated. There are so many things that are available to people, but in India you just get your acquittal. And in my documentary, actually, an expert says that, in India, that a man is acquitted of the charges that have been leveled against him is considered to be a big thing. That, you have been acquitted. You're not being going to be tried for this anymore. You're not being punished. So, be happy and then just move on in life. And though there's law of torts, though there are damage compensations, everything, but um, there are so many cases where people go on and fight for years and years and years and years. And just recently, in fact, I shared a case where a person won his, case of false accusation of dowry, and as a compensation, he was granted 1,000 rupees, which is a joke, which is just a terrible joke. So there are endless cases. There's 498A misuse, of course, and then what happens in marital relationships where kids are involved. In most of the cases, the custody goes to the mother, majority in major cases in India. And the fathers are in a very terrible shape where they have to they have to go to the court multiple times. Even just to give you an example of the corona pandemic, uh, there are fathers who have reached out to me who couldn't see their kids, even a glimpse of them, for months. And even when the court started having virtual conferences, they had to petition the court multiple times to get them just 1 hour of a video conference with their kids. So, um, in my humble opinion, this is absolute denial of a dignified living to a man and his basic rights. And this is what I highlight, and these are the stories that I tell.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing, Deepika. Those were some really hard stories to hear, but I think they needed to be talked about because it's very important. Um, hey, Isha, can you share your experiences on of men who are victims of abuse?
Well, to add to what Parth and Deepika have already stated, we talk when we think of domestic violence, we very easily jump to sexual abuse, physical abuse, or emotional abuse. There are other facets to this. There is social abuse, there is spiritual abuse, uh, something which is predominantly common. However, I believe men do not even realize that this is happening with them. I have come across a lot of cases where social abuse is common. The female partner socially insults the male publicly, and obviously must be privately as well. But then the man in question does not realize. Now, when you are met with such an incident, it is very confusing for me personally, because I am not certain whether I want to burst this person's bubble or whether I want to let it slide.
Mm.
And uh, it's really confusing, and just I'm unsure of how to deal with these things, because for a fact that men's abuse is not going to be taken seriously here in India. Like Deepika said, the cops will laugh, the people will laugh, society will not take him seriously. And if the woman accuses him of something, she will definitely be taken more seriously than he ever will be. So it's very difficult to even just be a bystander and see it. And I'm really glad that people have now begun talking about it. uh, Hopefully this will bring about a change in how these things are dealt with.
Yeah, definitely. There was one case that came up was Johnny Depp, and how, he kind of came out and said that he was abused, but no one believed him. And, Amber was automatically, they were just trusted her and her word. And when they went through this whole case, they really found out that he was actually went through a lot of abuse, had to suffer a lot.
Yeah, I mean, thanks to the
Mhm.
recordings that were found of them, because of which the case actually was decided in his favor a lot. But then, I mean, just imagine if it hadn't been there, if those audio recordings had not been there, what would it have been then? I mean, if Amber had come, I believe there were pictures where she had bruises, where her hair was there, and nobody would have believed Johnny Depp here.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't think there still are any repercussions for Amber Heard as much as there are for Johnny. He was sidelined. He was removed from projects. I think he has already faced the repercussions of something that he wasn't even guilty of. This is akin to exactly what I was talking about, right? Victim actually being shown as the abuser and already getting punished for it. I think there is no bigger example than that. But um, and there are so many cases like that actually, where it's a man who is the victim, he doesn't speak up, and the woman actually goes out and create concocted stories, and she is believed. And I remember making a tweet which actually went viral, that Johnny Depp had to actually come up with voice recordings, with his finger cut, with his court documents, with so many things to actually make a simple case for him. But all that people needed for Amber to make accusations against him is her words. And that's the reality, I think, the world over today. I'm not saying that women should be believed only if they have evidence. There are a lot of women who are in abusive relationships who cannot create evidence, who do not have evidence. Definitely believe them. But I have a problem with people not even willing to listen to the other side of the story. Whenever a man accuses a woman, the instinct, or the first reaction of everybody is, okay, can we listen to what the woman has to say about it and what is her side of the story? So this is where the problem lies, I guess.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Parth, you want to add something? Your take on
You know,
this?
sure, yeah. I think it's an interesting thing. See, there are 5 Pandavas and 1 Draupadi. What would happen if our myths were 1 Draupadi and 5 Pandavas, or 5 Draupadis and 1 Pandava, right? Like these messages are encoded in our origin myths. They're encoded. See, now it's interesting. We can duel at the level of polarity, right? Like my abuse, your abuse. One abuse is better than another abuse. One abuse needs more attention than another abuse. I think here the opportunity, because I know we have some short period here on the call, is in our spirituality we say we are Atma, Brahman, right? There's already also a sense of how do we go beyond the polarity, right? And so I think that there's the men's abuse is very subtle. I've seen in my sense of if you're a man who at some point, if you're under 55 and between 35 and 55 and you had some inability to generate income, you're told you're less of a man. So I don't know what Johnny Depp's situation is, and I don't know whoever that person was, but I talk about my reality and the reality of the people that I face, interface with. So there's a very subtle oppression of masculinity because there are these expectations of a role, and I think that we have this beautiful opportunity, I think, as South Asians to say, okay, it's like we don't, as men, can relieve ourselves of the pressure of being the provider and create space where we can allow ourselves to be more empathically strong. And I think that in the space where, like, I think women have agency, right? Like, how do we meet each other, right? Like at a very equal level playing field, because abuse is happening. Whether we are subjects of the abuse and we're dialoguing about this at a philosophical level and at the level of other people's experiences, a different thing, right? And we now have this opportunity, right? And your viewers have this opportunity to be like, hey, violation of something that's done to you, unbeknownst to it being done to you, is wrong. And so I think if we can focus at that level and say, hey, I was hurt, I was treated differently, I was touched differently, I was spoken to differently, and it hurt me. And even if I have the vocabulary and you don't have the words, let me create a space of safety for you to be able to say it was not right for you. And I think that's the world that we're all trying to create, right? And so I think men's abuse, women's abuse, it's really important. I think, again, hats off to Isha and Deepika for doing amazing work that you're doing, because it takes courage to step outside your own paradigm and go over there on the other side and advocate for the other's view, right? So I think it takes tremendous courage to do what you're doing. And I think that we all come together and say, hey, we don't want to stand for violation of choice anymore.
I'm so sorry to cut you short, Parth, but before Jatin Roy leaves, do you mind actually listening to me for a minute? I'm sorry, I really want to respond to this man.
Go
and
ahead.
I hope this is a man, right?
Yeah.
Jatin, you need to look at my timeline of a man being killed by his wife every freaking single day in India. And I'm not even talking about false accusations here, okay? You say that I, as a men's rights activist, is going to speak against feminism. Have you actually gone ahead and read the thoughts of feminists who say all men are trash? They would be happy if all men are killed. Can you imagine the kind of outrage that would happen across the world? And there is a feminist from Australia. I'm sorry, I have a bad memory and I'm forgetting it. Just last year, she wrote that she would be happy if all men are killed. And you know what? There was some outrage and even a small thing like a book project was not taken away from her. And I can give you thousands of cases where men, just being accused by a woman, were taken off their jobs, had their lives sacrificed. They are on roads. On a daily basis, I get talking to men whose lives have been destroyed. All right. I discuss cases on a daily basis of men who commit suicide, leaving tens or 15s of pages of suicide note. And it takes a police, Delhi police, a protest by me and hundreds of people because a man left a suicide note of 23 pages, even for an FIR to be registered. What are you even talking, Jatin? Listen, nobody here wants to take away the rights of women. And you and everybody, and please quote me on this and share this video anywhere you want, all right? I did not come to this space for any interest but seeking justice for people who are not heard. All right, Jatin? You get me a deterrent in law against false accusations and punishment to women who file false cases on men. You get me laws in India to compensate men who are tried for years and years and then proven innocent and then nothing happens to them. You get me laws like that and I will leave the work that I'm doing, all right? You get me a 498A where if a man is, please go back to my tweets from, since you read my tweets, please go back to my tweets from the lockdown time. You would remember that there was a guy whose entire head was bleeding. His FIR is not registered till date. You know why? Because the police says that should compromise with his physical abuser because that happens to be his wife. All right. You want to know more cases? There is an 18-year-old boy who I'm fighting for right now, who has become sort of a mental patient. Okay. He is gone into depression because a woman who wanted her cats to be roaming around in the society and not this boy playing badminton, which he should be playing at this age, she accused him of molestation. The entire society knows the case is false. The entire episode is recorded on CCTV camera. But you know what? This guy who scored 99.9 percentile in IIT was not able to write his main exams because he has this case of molestation on him. Do you mind going and talking to these people rather than blabbering on this chat and asking us to think about women? All of us do, all right? All of us do every single day and do not mind fighting for women, all right? I, as a matter of fact, have actually beaten up people who misbehaved with women in front of me. But you know what? When a man is beaten up by a woman, even if he is not at mistake, and there's so many videos that come out every day these days on social media, nothing happens to those women. What do you do about them, Jatin? You know what, Jatin? I don't want to be a feminist because you know what? Equality was a word invented before feminists. And I would like to stick by the word of equality and equality for all. Because you know what? When feminists say, no, and I'm absolutely not ashamed of not calling myself a feminist, all right? Please go and watch TEDx talk of Cassie J. She was a feminist. She made documentaries on feminist issues. And today she doesn't call herself a feminist. That takes a lot for a human being to change the stand. And you know what? When reality hits, it's always good to acknowledge that reality and then think what is the right thing to do and what is not the right thing to do. Having said that, there are a lot of feminists I personally know who are extremely empathetic to both men and women. Hats off to them, respect to them. But you know who all get listened to and who all get to make the laws of the land? People who are extremely one-sided biased, all right? There's a petition right now. There was a committee formed right now in India, which only asked for shared parenting. And the feminists you talk about, Jatin, do not want shared parenting because they think that all the fathers are abusers. If that's your feminism, fuck it.
So, Deepika, when we did the women's...
I'm sorry, Jatin was just being...
That's okay. When we did the women's abuse episode, we had...
He was being extremely...
we had a man come on there kind of saying the same thing. Why aren't we talking about men's abuse? So it happens everywhere, no matter where we go. So let's just let it go.
Imagine a person like that coming on a feminist platform Jatin, you would be removed from your job, honestly. People will
I
be
think
looking up where you work and you'll be
Parth,
taken off.
Parth, go
so.
ahead.
I'd like to offer just a distinction. So there's a masculinity, a femininity, and there's woman body, male body. Just because I'm masculine doesn't mean masculinity is 100% male body and femininity is 100% female body. And I think this is a nuance. So there's this understanding of masculinity and femininity. There's policy, and there's like our position around his right, her right, his right to choose, her right to choose at that level. Then there's masculinity, So I just wanted to share one thing. So December 9th through December 13th, I'm a director of a virtual summit called Voice to Men, the future of masculinity. Now, again, no answers, but it becomes this question is how is this energy of masculinity and the policies around like male rights and female rights treated, right? Because I think it's important to distinguish the two.
Very important.
Jatin, I would really want you to write to me and I will tell you about all the men who lost their jobs, okay? And I will also tell you about a man who was accused only on Twitter about sexual harassment. And you know what? His daughter was denied admission in a school because his father had a Me Too accusation on Twitter. You want more cases? I will tell you more cases. MJ Akbar was also removed from his job. The Terry guy was also removed from all his positions. I don't know which world are you living in, Jatin? You know what? You don't want us to talk about what we are talking about right now. And that's your problem. Anybody talking about men is a problem to people, I think, like you, who call themselves feminists. Sorry.
So
Yeah.
you mentioned
Let's just go ahead. Yeah.
you mentioned something about some subtle signs. Parth, you want to say something?
Yeah. So it's interesting because there's also this understanding of like the feminist perspective around like feminists are there's like this tension. I want to offer so there's a feminist perspective around masculinity. There's also another term called mythopoeic, which is influenced by our origin myths. So again, I went back to Ramayana, right? Ram wasn't kidnapped by Ravani. Sita was kidnapped by Ravan, right? Ram went to right. So in the embedded myths encoding is a mythopoeic view, right? Of like these very subtle encodings. Then there's a biological view, right? And so we could debate at the level of like rights, and I think we're all kind of like we're all messy. So I just want to say, like, Deepika, like, you don't need to justify like Jatin's response. I think like he's doing,
But I just love showing a mirror to people like Jatin, and it's really, really needed. They think that they are showing a mirror to us for some reason, for their superficial idea of what a men's right activist is. I had an Australian documentary filmmaker come to me and interview me for an hour. And she left saying that you're the first person I've met in my life who I can say truly, truly cares about equality and truly wants justice for everybody, men, women, everybody. And, I had heard a lot of things about you, but you are nothing that I have been told of you. So, but just because people want to sort of bring down anybody talking about men's abuse, I just feel like showing them a mirror. And that's what I'm doing to this guy. But I think it's an impossible case. So I think I will just, calm myself down. It's Happy Men's Day. So Happy Men's Day to Jatin as well.
Well,
we got your back,
that's a nice day because I had to remove him, and I think he's.
He's it's very interesting, Varun. He's saying men's mental health should always be talked about, but he doesn't realize that what are the things that are causing mental health problems to men. He just doesn't want people to talk about those problems which cause the mental health issues. So it's very funny. But anyways, we should just focus on our discussion.
It's more of a reflection of what he's wrestling with than what you're wrestling with.
Yeah,
Like
correct.
because
Absolutely. Yeah.
because
True.
and beautiful
Absolutely.
to Varun that you've created a platform for people to express their voice.
Yeah.
If you know you're doing great, right? Like it's when you're doing such good work, Varun, you're doing such good work. Deepika, you're doing such good work. Isha, is that people are gonna say what they need to say, and in
Mhm.
the space of safety, they're gonna say, "Now we can have an anti, you're wrong, I'm right, polarity dialogue, or we go beyond the polarity and say, hey, so what happened to you that you're so hurt?
Mhm.
What happened to you that you're
Have that
so
conversation.
bruised? Today's word these days is trauma. I guarantee you, in 2021, the word will be used tension. In 2022, the feminine word from trauma to tension will go bruising. I was
Mhm.
bruised because see, the feminine energy and spirit in the vocabulary is shifting.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
so trauma. Oh, this. I have to do something with this, right? Then becomes tension, and bruising. My heart is bruised.
Mhm.
Tell me how you feel. See, ये भाषा की रमत है. So, in the evolution of culture and civilization, the language has to change.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
unless we can support each other in creating new language to
Right.
go beyond the polarity, yeah, this poor fellow has some hurt. So at least he's taking the time to dialogue, right? He's doing whatever he's doing. It takes time, energy to say, I have an opinion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we all are welcome to this dialogue, right? So
Yeah.
I think this is the opportunity. I think we're giants, or conscious individuals like us get to look at the shadow and the light and say, abuse violation is happening at the personal level and also at the gender level. And I think again, hats off to you for doing this amazing policy work, Deepika. And Isha, you guys
Thank you,
are.
Varun.
Thank you. You're doing great work.
Thank you. Yeah.
So Isha, I wanted to
To
ask.
add to what Parth is saying,
Go ahead.
you know, with regards to this case that we've been discussing regards to Jatin, um, what I do not get is why is it that somebody who's considered a feminist is automatically considered to be against women? I mean, I do not remember Deepika speaking even one word against women and women's right. All she's been speaking about is uh, regarding men's right, men's mental health, and regarding false cases against men. But I mean, how does she become anti women? Why is there that connection being made by some people?
Yeah, they automatically think that, if you're for men, you're against women. But I don't, and I think everyone on this panel also agrees with us when we say that it's not when we're for somebody, we mean we're against the opposite side.
Yeah.
There's a reason I
It's
usually do not get, my apologies to anybody if I sounded rude or riled up, but there are real ramifications for things like Jatin did in the discussion today. And let me tell you, I come from this side of media. Media is hell scared to tell the other side of the story, just because of this. Because the feminists who go on their panels tell them that if you're talking about men's rights, you are anti woman, you are going against the rights of women. If you're going to tell about false accusations, you're doing a disservice to women. And that is a disservice to justice. There are so many cases that I've covered, Rohtak sister, Sarvjeet, the Rohtak double gang rape case, and so many cases. And you would be appalled to know that there was this Rohtak double gang rape case, and which was an absolutely false concocted case, and all these four boys who were accused of the gang rape had CCTV footages of various locations across the day where they were hundreds of kilometers away, to prove their innocence, that they were not even there at that location. And one person can lie, can two people lie, can three people lie, can four people lie up with CCTV footages, with people trying to be the witness, not trying to be the witness of having dealt with them exactly at that time where that woman is saying she was gang raped by these men. And then Arnab Goswami goes and debates that we have come to a point where accused of gang rape gang rape are showing their evidences to prove their innocence. What kind of a society are we in? You know, this is bizarre. This is as bizarre as it can get. And these kind of things, if these things are shown to people in the West, in the developed worlds, they would be like, what kind of crazy madness is really going on in India? And
Mhm.
the Indian media, on the other side, is so scared to tell these stories because the feminists have influence everywhere in the system. They have the power. Anybody writes anything on Twitter. I remember Salman Khan making a very, you know, casual, of course, remark, and that became such a big outrage. Anybody says one statement, it becomes a big outrage. But here, there are men dying and with extreme emotions writing down their last words that the system is biased, the system failed us. Media doesn't care because these lives are probably not important for them. How does talking about men become anti women? And that's why no matter how much I try, I don't let people like Jatin Roy go.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought it up. I'm glad we addressed that right when it came up. Let's get a question from the audience. Ashish has a question for you, Deepika. In false rape cases, why are women not punished?
All right, Ashish, it's not just about false rape cases. The laws for perjury that exists in India are extremely weak. Um, the section, I'll just give you a small example, okay? Now, there's an IPS officer, Mr. Amitabh Thakur, whose case I tell in my documentary. His wife filed a public interest litigation against the mining minister of UP because he was involved in big kind of scandal and he was misappropriating funds and doing mining, which was illegal, and she filed a PIL for that. And to teach her a lesson, her husband, who happens to be an IPS officer, was falsely accused of rape by two women. You know, quite closely, sort of orchestrated by the State Women's Commission. And I'm going on record saying this because this is what happened, right? And he was able to eventually prove beyond reasonable doubt that nothing like that happened. And these women were set up by their, some people who wanted to shut them up. And eventually, police filed a 182 case in this case on the woman who filed a false rape case on Mr. Amitabh Thakur. But this is 2 years ago. Till date, the police hasn't been able to find the woman. They say we can't trace the woman, and so nothing happens. There was a case in Rohtak where a woman filed a false gang rape case against her boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, and his friend, and she was asked to stand for 7 hours in the court because she was married by then and she had a family. So one, the laws for perjury are weak. Two, people always think that the woman was influenced, as if the woman is, it's sad to say, but, it's kind of crazy the way adult women are treated as kids in India, thinking that they can be influenced by the guidance of a lawyer, guidance of some NGO, guidance of some family member. They don't have their mind of their own. And the courts say, oh my God, she got influenced, and she was misguided, and, she can be let go of. So it's social stereotypes, it's undervaluing the lives of men who get impacted by these cases, and this is a very, very strong point. If a if a if we know that a woman has been violated by a man, the kind of anger, the kind of rage that we feel against that man as upright human beings, and I'm not saying everybody does that. There are a lot of people who do not have any kind of empathy, sympathy, whether it's a man suffering or a woman suffering. There are a lot of people who are like that because it doesn't impact their life in any way. And most of the people are bystanders in these issues, and let me admit that they are not very keen on, they don't care about women also getting justice, but they would still care more about a woman being treated nicely rather than a man. So coming back to the point is the value, the sort of a less value that we give to a man's life as compared to a woman's life leads to these kind of things. uh, People think that a false rape accusation or a false dowry accusation uh, is not something that can really destroy a man's life. They do not understand the kind of trauma that people who have these allegations go through. And hence, courts do not take these cases seriously. And honestly, litigation is a very, very tiring process in India. When people get acquitted after 4 years, 5 years, 6 years of trial, honestly, they do not have any energy to pursue these cases anymore. They do not want to go back to the system and seek recourse from a system that failed them in the first place. So one of the guy in the Rohtak double gang rape case who's featured in India's Sons says this line and it sticks in my mind. He says, "I showed them the proofs that I had right in the beginning when the case started. I spent 2 years in jail, 4 years in trial, and they acquitted me on the basis of exactly those evidences. So can I ask them what exactly were they doing for these 4 years?" No, he can't. But it's a genuine question, right? And the courts did not give anything to them, nothing. So undervaluing a man's life, the perjury laws being extremely weak, the police not really interested in pursuing cases like this, along with the person who is falsely accused and then later acquitted. So there are a couple of reasons because of which this is there. But at the end of this, I really want to share because this is an information which is important. A small country like Bangladesh passed a law, amended their dowry law, brought a special provision that would punish a person, a woman who would file a false dowry case with 5 years of imprisonment and financial fine as well. If Bangladesh can do this, I'm sure India can do this as well, but I don't know when.
Well, hopefully that happens soon. I actually do want to get back to that in a second. But Parth had mentioned that he had to leave a little early. So I'm going to ask Parth this question. What advice do you have for someone who may be in an abusive relationship but feel like they can't get out? Parth?
Thank you. Very good question. One advice is, where do you feel as though your personal sense of sovereignty is violated? So if your sense of sovereignty and your rights are violated, or you're feeling hurt and harmed, and you don't have the vocabulary, the ability, or the support to get help, then you need to get out. Secondly, I think that everyone needs coaching. I think what happens oftentimes is that, again, sometimes in an abusive relationship, there's a lot of projection that occurs. So, we say, this happened to me. All women are bad. All men are bad. All this are bad or that's bad. But there's no all. There's the 7 people that I interacted with, or the 15 people I interacted with, or the 30 people I interacted with. And then to say all of them, right, is a projection. It's unfair, because we don't want to be all of them. If we say all Indians are this way, we don't want to be part, right? So I think when you're in an abusive relationship, it's important to, one, do whatever the steps one needs to take to get connected to and reclaim a sense of sovereignty. Right? Where are my violations and my needs not being met? And where am I feeling hurt? Then ask for help. I think another thing again, I don't have too many experiences with domestic abuse. I think some of you have had more stark cases. I deal with more with cases where it's not so, it doesn't get to the level of domestic abuse or at the level of like calling the cops, but it gets at more an emotional level where people hold on to things for 10, 15 years and then all of a sudden things happen, right? So again, the abusive relationship, I would inquire is where can we learn vocabulary of saying, you did this to me, I feel this way.
Mm.
And I don't want to feel this way. And I want to really create connection with you. And how do I do that? And I feel confused in knowing how to do that. So there's a little coaching tip. It says, claim your desires and own your limitations.
Mm.
Here's my desire and here's my limitation.
Can you give us another example of that?
Sure. I'll give you an example. So I've come across scenarios of men who, when I ask them, what is the thing that you're dealing with? It says, I feel inadequate. So I said, well, when was the time you felt inadequate? I got fired. I got laid off and I couldn't pay for my partner. She had to give me the money to give to the customer or the person to, and I felt like I couldn't provide. I felt like shitty of a guy, you know? I go, wow, like, well, when you are able to provide, how does that make you feel? It makes me feel connected, makes me feel worthy, makes me feel like I'm important. So it's great. Claim your desire, own your limitation. Your desires to feel important, your desires to feel equal, your desires to feel appreciated and celebrated in your contribution.
Mm.
And when you're not feeling that way, you can say, I'm not feeling that way.
Mm.
And I'm having a tough time expressing that I don't feel equal in this relationship.
Mm.
Claim your desire, own your limitation. My desire is I want this, and my limitation is I'm struggling and I don't really know how to do it.
Mm.
You know, and I think that the emotional intelligence that we as men are taught we're taught to do angry and sad really well. We're not taught to do like, I feel insecure, I feel frustrated, I feel inadequate. Like, oh, that's okay. Tell me more about that.
Right.
You know, as guys, it's like, you're inadequate. What's wrong with you? Man up, nut up.
Man up. Yeah.
Figure it out. Fix it so you can be adequate.
Yeah.
So this is the coding, you know. And so again, hats off to Deepika and Isha for just holding the space of empathy and compassion for our side. You know, and I think what we need to do as guys is kind of like forgive ourselves for the ways that we felt we didn't measure up. It's not the women in our lives' fault. It's the cultural encoding's fault.
Mm.
And then when we can forgive ourselves for that and let that go, then we're no longer in the feminist, non-feminist theory. Then we can be like, hey, we're trying to help each other heal and help others heal.
Right.
And let's have that dialogue. Let's be curious and वो उसका भाषा क्या है? You know, what is the vocabulary of that dialogue?
And we're not
so,
that vocabulary.
Yeah, you know, so 2020 is the year of trauma. 2021 can be the year of hope. Anyway,
Well, the only vocabulary right now that is so predominant across the world is toxic masculinity. Even before actually men start talking about problems, people think that solving men's issues is actually solving toxic masculinity somehow. And nobody wants to understand what's happening deep inside the hearts of these people who think they're toxically masculine. But anyways, yeah, Varun.
And so that's where the healing comes in, right? The toxic masculinity part to bring you in. What's kind of a method for them to heal? Like, what's your advice?
For me, I think. Oh, sorry.
Parth. No, Parth.
Yeah, please, Parth, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it's really important to get in touch with our connection. So, for me personally, I have a practice called I have a crying quota. Every week, for an hour, I need to cry. Now, whether I watch some thing, you know, that activates that feeling, or I sit in meditation and I feel. And I think this is the thing. See, the masculine mind is the level of content. Doing, thinking, thinking is this. The feminine, again, is feeling. And I think that as men, if we can give ourselves permission to feel and cry and release. See, let me share with you something about human development. Boys, interesting human development fact. At the age of 7 to 8, boys are more emotionally sensitive than girls are. There's recent research now done at a biological level. Boys are more emotionally sensitive than girls are. So, and it typically happens with boys 2 years earlier than girls. The problem occurs is that emotional expression is not accepted in our society. So if you cry as a boy, stop crying, stop being a girl.
Yeah.
Any show of weakness is associated with either being a woman or a woman's body part. This is how we're taught. So then what happens is shut it down, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. So then what happens when we become adolescent, 18, 16, 17, and we're understanding our physical nature and, sexuality and these things happen, all of a sudden, all those emotions start coming up. And when that volcano erupts, we were taught to shut it down. So what happens? Shut it down. Do your job. Make the money. Do your job. If you don't do your job, you're forgotten. You're dismissed. So, this is this encoding that occurs. And so within this encoding, what occurs is this binary us versus them situation occurs. And so I think to answer your question, Varun, I think as guys, if we can create safety within ourselves and within each other to be like, hey, let me hold your hand and let me cry with you. It's okay. And I think, again, hats off to the women here who are creating that space of safety for guys. And I think once we can allow ourselves that permission to do that, then we can heal the man-child wound within us. And then women, it's going to be an amazing, easier job for you. Then you don't have to deal with that, because we can, again, it's an unknown space. And I think this is where, what Varun is doing, what you all are doing, we're operating on the fringes. The middle 50, 25 to 75% of consciousness is still catching up to this dialogue.
Right. Definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
So then we don't have to like, oh, you're wrong. We're here. We're on the fringes. So let's all connect and let's all create, and then everybody will arise and catch up in their own rhythm.
Hey, Isha, I wanted to bring you in on this conversation about the healing part. Do you have any suggestions for how people can heal?
I think sharing is a very important part here. But then again, along with sharing comes a very big challenge that I believe men are facing today is finding somebody to share it with. Not too many people understand men's abuse or violence against men. And, the more you talk, the more you share, the more you feel better. Definitely, yes, you can get better advice, you can get better suggestions. But the biggest challenge I truly believe is finding somebody with whom, when you share, is not going to shut you down, is not going to laugh at you, is not going to misunderstand you, is not going to make you feel little, is not going to tell you to man up and just uh, not be like a girl, or not act like a woman, not feel weak. So yeah, my advice would be sharing, but then definitely finding somebody perfect to share it with, and then sharing. Yeah, that'll definitely make it. I don't know if it'll make it easier or better, but that'll at least make the journey make a little more logical. When you are the one who's abused, definitely shame, fear, all these things are there in your head, and you do not know what it is. The blame shifting definitely works against every reasoning and logical point in your head. You think you deserve it for some reason, and yeah, if you have somebody to talk with, if you have somebody with whom you can speak things out with, you can discuss these things, then yeah, uh, it
I
could
think
help
that's
a lot.
very important. That's very important. You mentioned sharing and having that safe space. Like Parth has already, come on and thanked our the women panelists for creating this safe space and being part of this conversation. I think that's very important because if you don't have a space to be yourself with somebody, then you're never gonna have that experience of who you really are. And I think having that, like me and my wife, we have that relationship. We have that space where I can share anything with her. She can share anything with me, no matter how embarrassing, no matter how shameful, no matter what it is. But not many people have that. So having a coach possibly could help with that experience as well, where they create that open space for you and you just pour your heart out and just share whatever you have to share. Uh,
Yeah.
very, very good advice. Thank you, Isha. So, Deepika, why why do men not leave these abusive relationships?
Uh, um, okay. Let me first speak a little bit of my mind on the question you asked, Parth. What
Sure.
can men do if they are facing abusive relationship? And before I get on to that, let me share with you, and maybe it is surprising for a lot of people, but I hear this all the time that men can cry, men can cry, men can cry. Honestly, for the last 8 years, I've had more men cry in front of me, on phone with me, and breaking completely down as compared to women. Uh, there are just so many men who call me up and just break down with just 2 words of my saying, "Tell me what happened." That's it. Because they probably in their mind already know that they are talking to a person who's not going to judge them, who's not going to hold them, blame them, who's not going to tell them that it's your fault, and who's not going to ask them to shut it up and not talk about it. Because I think they already have it in their mind that there's somebody who's going to lend us an ear and just hear us out completely and then tell us something. So many men have cried to me, Varun, that I have lost the count. Just 2 days ago, there was a man who called me at 11:30 in the night and kept crying, crying, crying. Didn't say a word. I didn't say a word either. All that I asked was, please tell me what happened, and we will sort it out. Right? So it comes very naturally for women to cry, and they're very comfortable in sharing whatever is happening with them, and women also actually understand each other much better, and their coping mechanism is very different from what uh, men to men is, you know um, and there's nobody to be blamed here. It's kind of the way we are brought up, the kind of social circles we live in, the kind of predominant notions about gender that we have. And definitely men don't cry plays a role over here, but I think a lot of men, especially brought up in urban setups and in more evolved setups, have understood that they can express, they can cry, they can be in pain, and they do want to express, but uh, they don't find people or a space to be themselves. They cannot share because they are always afraid that they'll be judged. So that definitely plays a role. Now, coming back to your question of um, coming back to your question of why don't men get out of abusive relationships? One, there's a lot at stake.
Mm.
Uh, a lot at stake, especially in terms of legal repercussions in India. There is a lot at stake. Do they want their parents to be dragged to the courts? Uh, do they want their, you know, social circle to be sort of taken away, because in India, social circles come a lot with marital relationships, especially if you are beyond a certain age, right? So, for example, I am quite advanced in my life and I am not yet married. Most of my friends still are people who are either separated, divorced, somewhere single, I still do not have a lot of friends who are married, or my regular, visits are not with people who are in a marital relationship, because they tend to hang out with couples, they have couple parties, they have couple gatherings. So, if they are then going to be in divorced and separated, they're going to be thrown away after from these social circles. uh, they are going to think, then they'll have to think about alimony. They will have to think about, and in India, it's not very easy to get out whether it's abusive or non-abusive, and it's both for men and women, and I'm not saying this is only for men. It's a little difficult for people to get out of a easier for women but difficult for men to get out of a marriage anyways, because of the stereotypes that we have around divorce, because of the way people look at divorced men or women. And socially, I think women who are divorced also face quite a lot of challenges. But when it's abused, first thing is there are a lot of ramifications, and two is, I think men have a habit to take it to the extremes. They always think that they can still handle. It's not that bad. Maybe something more worse will happen than what is happening right now. And I was reading the questions that you had sent to me, and you had written something about, what are the signs of abuse or abuse that men face. So a very common pattern that I see happening in India with development and with women becoming educated, becoming more aware of their rights, uh, um, and it's not just about women. I think we as a society as a whole are becoming very individualistic. We think a lot about ourselves and all those things about a family, nurturing a family, being in a relationship, and having deriving happiness out of sharing a family, or being with so many people under the same roof. That has kind of gone away because we have become very self-centered, individualistic. We're all the time in our own spaces, on our phones and stuff like that. So a lot of cases that I come across is where women would ask a man to separate from his parents because she doesn't want to live with his parents, anymore. She doesn't want to share the house with them, and not just she would ask him to separate from his parents. In a lot of times, uh, she would say, "You will not have any contact with your family," and men sort of always try to rationalize that, okay, she's my life partner, I have to spend the life with her. They don't see it as some kind of emotional domination or abuse. They are like, okay, I have to keep her happy, she's my wife, I have kids, I have to keep them happy, my primary responsibility is them. So if she's asking me to do this, then okay, I will do this. But they don't realize that this kind of an arrangement, which is perhaps causing some kind of pain to them, will lead to further more demands which will they will not be able to fulfill, and one day will come where this would eventually blow up and lead to some more violence, some more abuse, and some more domination. So the men try to take it to the extreme. And having said that, let me also, maybe I'm old school, I don't have any problems in calling myself old school. I think the biggest problem in today's relationship is miscommunication. More than miscommunication, I think it is non communication. People fear to talk about what they are feeling. People think that everything will be okay, 2-3 दिन लड़ाई हो गई, ठीक है, चौथे दिन सब कुछ ठीक हो जाएगा. लेकिन सब लोगों के लिए ठीक नहीं होता है. बहुत से ऐसे लोग हैं जिनके लिए छोटी 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 चीजें साथ में मिलके इतनी बड़ी हो जाती है कि उनको समझ में ही नहीं आता कि क्या हम वही हैं जो हम थे. They sort of lose their sense of self and they think that they have become some different person. And that's the point of realization where there is no sort of going back then. Then everything becomes a burden, everything becomes painful, and life itself becomes so hard to go by. So uh, uh, I think one of the major things that I always advise to men who are in relationships that can be salvaged, and I get a lot of men coming to me for counseling where I think that the relationship can be salvaged. There is miscommunication, and there is, loss of fulfillment of expectations from both the sides, which can be solved by talking. And trust me, a lot of problems in relationship can actually be solved by talking, which people are just missing. And when lawyers and all these people come in between, then it all goes haywire. There are a lot of women who have come to me and said, somebody is advising me to file a false case, what do you say? And I always tell her as well that, if you think that your man is not bad, he has not beaten you up, he has not been abusive to you, and it's a case of miscommunication, please talk. Don't listen to anybody, because it is your life and these cases will not serve any purpose.
Hey, Deepika,
So my
Parth,
advice is to talk it out. Yes, tell me. Yeah.
no, I just saying Parth has to leave, so I just wanted to, before he goes,
Oh,
I wanted to thank him for joining and sharing your views and giving advice to everybody on as the audience. So thank you so much for joining, Parth. Thank you for taking the time, waking up early, and joining us here.
My
thank you
pleasure.
so
Thank
much,
you,
Parth. Pleasure
Varun.
listening
Thank
to
you,
you.
Isha. Thank you, Deepika, as well. Yeah, same here. Hats off to you again. Thank you for your strength,
Thank you.
courage, and your resilience. And let's keep working together.
Yeah,
Yep.
definitely, Parth. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Varun.
Thank you for
You
joining
got it.
us.
Take care.
So yeah, Deepika ji, you mentioned subtle signs, right? You were talking about subtle signs subtle signs of abuse that men face. I want to bring Isha in this conversation as well, to talk about those subtle signs that men face. Isha,
Yeah.
can you talk about like what signs of abuse or subtle signs of abuse that you've seen that men come across? I know you mentioned a couple earlier, so if you can elaborate on
Yeah.
those.
Uh, well, something which is something like maybe financially being controlled. A lot of women uh, like their partners to be financially dependent on them. This might not being seen as abuse, but it definitely is. It is a situation where the woman in question demands control, uh, a part control of the person's life. Then, like spoke about earlier, the social insults in public, in private, making the man feel that nobody else would want him, that he's not good enough, uh, things like those. Spiritual, when the man does not have a choice of spiritually following what he believes his calling is. um, yeah, I mean, emotional I think is also one of a very big common cases that I have come across, where the man is made to believe that he is actually the one who is in control. He's the one who's actually abusing her. uh, you know it's very easy for the women to shed tears. And I mean, again, I'm not speaking about every single woman here, but then I'm speaking about the women who are actually abusing their partners, not just partners, about almost about anybody, by acting like the damsel in distress and taking emotional faida of the men, because uh, men are by default, I wouldn't say created, but brought up with the idea of uh, taking care of the women around them. So the damsel in distress things and the men do not realize that they are the one who are being abused here. So yeah, these are some of the common ones that I think. I mean, obviously apart from the physical abuse, because that's being spoken about quite a lot. So
That's definitely the most in your face, and you get to actually feel it. But then it's the subtle ones that people, and people don't realize that they're going through it. And that's the part. That's the reason I brought up that question, is for them to understand that, hey, there are other ways outside of physical abuse that you may already be going through it. So please watch out for those signs. So Deepika ji, when what can an ally or a family member or friend do if they know someone who has experienced domestic violence or abuse? We usually tend to keep quiet because sometimes one person has the power, and then people who are just on the sidelines, they end up just watching instead of, talking about it or acting on it. So what advice can we give for them?
Uh, I think I'm going to come to the advice that we can give a little later. But one thing that I certainly wish to warn people to not do is to, allow a person go down in alcohol, uh, and or use any kind of things that, take you off your senses to get rid of the pain that you're feeling. This is something which is very, very dangerous. It never solves the problem, and it just takes people to an abyss they cannot come out from. So, one thing people should not do at all is to be okay with a person who is dealing with, relationship abuse or any kind of turmoils in their relationship, to immerse themselves in any of these substances. If that is happening in front of you, and if you're not doing anything about it, I think you should do something about it. Now, what can you do? One is, of course, uh, see if you can ask your friend, family member, or anybody who you know is having a problem like this, to first share, first open their heart up कि हो क्या रहा है तुम्हारी लाइफ में, क्या प्रॉब्लम है, और sometimes probably ask them only that what do you think is the solution, or what do you want to do, and any way that you can, you know empower them, assist them in reaching to the solution that they already know of, then assist them. If that's not the case, and that's absolutely and they're absolutely clueless of something like this, now increasingly there are a lot of people who are reaching out to me for their friends, for their family member, for someone they know in their office, who they came to know that is dealing with problem like that, and reaching out to me and telling that, this person is facing this, and is there anything that you can do for this person? And I tell them it will be really nice if that person can themselves reach out to me. But if that person is shy or under any doubt, then I ask them what's the problem, and little bit of advice that I can, sort of pass on, I do. So the point is, reach out to the people who now definitely exist as support groups for men. And this is across the world. Almost most of the countries now, I think so, have small little tiny support groups for men. Uh, there, countries like UK now also have domestic violence shelters for men where they can go if they are victims of domestic violence. But in India, let me talk specifically about India. There are men's rights groups that have helplines. There is Save Indian Family Foundation, there is Save Indian Family, there is Sahodar Trust. People can Google their helpline numbers, people can call them, discuss their issues. And the best thing about these helplines is that the people who are going to be attending to your calls, or people who will try to help you, are not any professional counselors. When I say this, I don't mean to undermine the capacity and the capability of professional counselors, but I'm saying you will more be talking to people who have themselves gone through situations like these, and hence sort of come with personal experience and understanding, like I do. I'm not a professional counselor, but I counsel hundreds of people because I've dealt with this myself. I have handled almost every kind of situation that can arise in this scenario, and then counsel. So reach out to the support groups and seek help, seek help, seek help, seek help. Don't bury yourself in your own thoughts. Don't fall into depression. Of course, falling into depression is not into your hands, but analyze what's happening in your life, reflect, meditation also helps, uh, uh, spirituality also helps. But at the end of the day, a lot of solutions lies in the courts, or maybe anywhere in the arena that you're facing these situations. One of the biggest messages that I would like to convey to, especially to men who are dealing with legal battles, is legal battles are 10% legal and 90% emotional. If you can take care of your emotional well-being, you'll be able to take care of your legal cases as well. But if you'll all destroy your emotional well-being, then you'll not be able to take care even of your legal battles. Of course, this is very, very specific subject of issue of abuse of men, but I think it applies everywhere, that as long as you can keep your emotional self nourished, I think you'll be able to handle the battles and the challenges that come onto your life. So if you as an ally, as a friend, as a family member, assist that person emotionally, and many times just listening also helps. Let them completely share without any judgment. That also helps. So these are things that people can do actually to help any man out there who is facing any kind of issue in their life.
Thank you. Thank you for the in-depth explanation. And Isha, can you add something to that on how we could help men going through this tough situation?
Well, I think Deepika has covered a lot of points that I would have spoken about. To add to what she has said, um, you know, uh, she spoke about seeking help. Um, the problem I see here is not a lot of people know where to go for help. I mean, until very recent, as recent as maybe a year and a half ago, I myself was not aware of these groups existing in India. Um, and like everybody is already aware, it's not very easy to find help, find advice. I mean, you had asked a question to Parth regarding what would be his advice to somebody who's going through
The
abuse
abuse.
like this. I am glad you did not ask me this question, because I am terribly confused myself of what should be the advice. I mean, imagine I advise somebody to go seek legal help, legal counsel, take the legal way, and like we all know, the let's say the woman in question accuses him of something and his life is destroyed. I mean, what do you really do here unless a lot of things change, unless perjury laws are changed, unless these things begin to be taken seriously by the society, by the people, by friends and family, uh, by feminists and pseudo feminists. I really myself am at a loss at what should really be the advice uh, given to these people who are experiencing this abuse. So,
That's a great question you bring up on what can we do to change those laws. And I want to bring Deepika into this part as well. Like there was many people in the audience have brought up this question as well. So what can we do as a collective to bring about this change in the laws in our penal code system?
Um, this is this is where I also fall short of words, honestly. But um, whenever we talk about changes that have major changes that have come about in terms of women's rights, uh, these case laws, these judgments, these guidelines, these changes in the provisions of laws have happened by deep judicial intervention by women's rights groups and by the feminists. Uh, there's a lot of judicial help available, and feminist organizations and women's rights organizations actually very seriously involve themselves with any case where they think it can turn around the laws, it can turn around the way things are. Okay. And I completely understand the challenges that the men's rights groups face, because we do not have too much of judicial intervention right now. And there are plethora of reasons behind that: funding, full-time people working on these things. Right now, men's rights movements majorly involve people who are doing volunteer time, devotion to this cause, or voluntarily, taking calls of people and not doing this full time. There are barely any people working full time on men's rights, and hence, they are challenged in terms of time to do judicial interventions, and there's no funding. But coming back to the point, there's a lot of feminist intervention, and this comes when somebody decides to challenge the status quo, right? Whether there is the sexual harassment Vishakha guidelines that came, or there are, ample of cases which have become landmark cases in terms of bringing the changes for women's rights. It's the men who are in extremely peculiar situations where they want to challenge the laws of the land, who will have to go right up till the Supreme Court and ask these questions to the lawmakers. That's when the laws will change. That's when people will rally behind this specific peculiar case and ask these questions. So it's very important for, I know it's a difficult fight going to the Supreme Court. It's financially, um, difficult. It's timefully difficult, and there are a lot of challenges. But men will have to overcome those challenges. And for example, to just give you one example, there was a case of Arnesh Kumar versus State of Bihar, and that's the case where very, very prominent, sort of, uh, I would say, some kind of, how do what's the word that I'd say, things changed a little bit in terms of 498A. It's not a new thing that came, but Supreme Court ratified that, until unless police sends a 41 section 41A CRPC notice to the husband and his family, and he responds to that and then joins the investigation, if he's doing all of that, then you don't need to arrest. So arrests, came down a lot in 498 IPC. These arrests were humongous, 1,30,000. It had reached 1,30,000 a year, kind of a thing, before 2014, and they came down by 25,000 within the next 2 years or so. This happened because Arnesh, in his bail application, when High Court rejected it, did not lose hope. He went to the Supreme Court, and then Supreme Court took up his case and then analyzed, whatever was happening once again with 498. And I thought, okay, how long will this go on? We need to bring in some guidelines. The law did not change, but some guidelines changed. So these kind of cases need to happen more and more. People need to take their battles right up to the Supreme Court more and more, to have these judicial interventions taken up and then some kind of changes brought in. As far as parliamentarians are concerned, laws are, of course, eventually changed in the parliament only. Uh, I think there are more and more people who need to show the parliamentarians that men's issue is a serious issue. There is nothing wrong in talking about sufferings of men, and it's a human problem that needs addressing and solution. uh, they need to see a value in it. Until unless they see a value in it, nothing will happen. So as much as activism, as much as writing to these member of parliaments, as much as people from across India can reach out to their local member of parliaments with their problems, write to them and seek their intervention in it, all of these well efforts are the only things that will lead to change and nothing else. So it's a long way, but there need to be more and more people involved to actually bring about this challenge. And I'm really glad that I feel happy. There's some people say that why not acknowledge men for doing this and acknowledge women for doing this? But I think it is natural to acknowledge that we see very rare and not often. So thanks to women like Isha, now I see a lot of women actually coming forward and talking about this, which is actually a very good change, because uh, I think emotionally women understand these problems and empathize with these problems, and if they lend a voice to this cause, then I think two forces join together, because people think, okay, men will anyways talk about men, but if women also talk about men's issues, which is not really talked about, then I think that's quite a force that we can go ahead with. And I'm glad a lot of women like Isha are now coming forward and talking about men as well. So it's a journey.
Yeah.
uh,
It's
it's
a
a
long
journey.
journey. Yeah.
It's
And
a
I feel
long
like
journey.
it's one of those things where it's like we have to chip away at it slowly, slowly, just chipping away at a big rock until you finally get
Absolutely.
the sculpture, and uh,
Absolutely.
everybody has to put in that work to slowly, slowly chip, keep chipping away at everything that exists.
Absolutely.
It's a really good point that you bring up, that women have to be involved in this conversation, have to lead it in some way, because kind of like what happened when you mentioned with the women's abuse, where there was a
Yeah.
man who had to lead it and take it up all the way. I feel like women
Absolutely.
have to play that role in this issue, and that's when it'll gain some serious momentum.
Absolutely. And it just to encourage people who are listening to us today, and I hope it is seen and heard by a lot of people. The men's right activists in UK were able to eventually form a force where the member of parliaments or the parliamentarians there had to sit up and take note of the issues that men face. And a member of parliament is now very, very actively involved in the men's issues there. And on International Men's Day, they actually have a session where discuss men's issues. So, anything is possible if we try. But of course, no change happens in a day. So it's a long, long journey.
Definitely, it's trying, and then multiple people coming and putting in that effort and putting in that energy to break down that wall. So
Yes.
Isha, I wanted to ask you, what can the community do to support ending violence against men? Isha? Oh, I think she's on mute.
So your voice is breaking. Can you say that again?
Oh, I said, what can the community do to support ending violence against men?
I think, like Deepika said, we really need to talk more and more, educate more and more people. That would be a really good start, because the more the people we talk to, the more people get educated, and the chain reaction will begin. Uh, like she spoke about the UK case where the parliament had to take note of what was happening around. Let's just hope that with the more number of people who are aware of these issues, who start taking these issues seriously, instead of just thinking of this as something of a joke or something that doesn't really happen, or something which suddenly makes people who are talking about it anti-feminist. Um, yeah, so creating awareness would be a really good start, because that's where everything will begin from.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of calls in the audience for Deepika to join politics. That's when power to change.
Oh God. Yeah, a lot of people actually want me to join politics. Only if I was a very shrewd person, very emotional person. I don't think politics is cut for emotional people like me. I get heartbroken very soon.
Maybe you'll learn that
Sorry.
along the way.
I can't do politics, I just can't play those games. I'm a very straightforward person. But let's see. Never say a never.
All right. So, Deepika, any last words? We're going to take our last kind of final words for this topic.
Um, I think I sort of always say this as an end note. Let's all be human. Let's all be empathetic towards pain of and suffering of anybody who is dealing with trauma and abuse and dealing with situations in their life, whether it's a man or a woman. Uh, Understand them. If you cannot do anything, then at least listen to them. And these are the words that I uh, always share. Um, for a healthy society, we need to have both men and women who are healthy, happy, and standing for each other. Uh, Men and women are not competitors. They complement each other. So uh, I would always ask men to be very kind, empathetic, very caring, and very um, provide a safe environment for women to be themselves, to grow, to live this life happy, healthy, and safe. And exactly the same I would ask of women, to be kind, to be empathetic, to uh, be, you know, to be with men where they can grow themselves, where they just don't restrict themselves to be as protectors and providers, and put all the responsibility on them and think that they are worth only if they cater to these responsibilities, and have them live their life without being judged all the time. And one thing that I really want to say to men out there is, stop living a life where you value yourself on the basis of expectations of women around you. Okay, you are yourself as a whole human being the way you are, and you have all the right to be happy, healthy, and the way you want to be, without the judgments of others. Okay, so which doesn't mean that you become this angry and then this whatever, but be kind, be who you are, and don't be a victim of judgment of others. And you are absolutely fine the way you are as a man, and it's not a crime to be a man. uh, just ignore anybody who calls all men trash and all of that, because that's not what defines you. What feminists think of men, and not all feminists, but some radical feminists, definitely do not define men or masculinity. And yeah, to both men and women, we are not enemies of each other. We can be friends, we can be partners, we can be for each other without any judgment. So, yeah, let's just all be kind to each other, and not just men or women, but to animals, to elderly, to everybody around us, to make this world a better place.
Yeah, no, thank you. You brought up a really good point about how we need balance between that masculine and the feminine in this world, that energy. And I feel like that's the same, that's the truth is also the same for us, where each individual person has that little masculine, little feminine, and it's our role to bring that into balance. Otherwise, it leads to toxic masculinity or toxic femininity. It can go either way.
Absolutely.
Isha, any last words?
Well, first, let me say, Deepika, I'm really glad you spoke about the men and women complementing each other instead of the competition, because, yes, that's, I guess, the way most of the world sees the opposite gender. And very true, wise words. For my end note, I would like to say, it's very widely spoken that the the women have left the kitchen, but the men have not yet entered the kitchen, or the women have left the home, but then men have not yet really taken up the cause, or assisting the woman of the house with all of these things. Uh, Similarly, feminism is being spoken about widely, but violence against men's problems, men's mental health are not being spoken up yet. These are issues that need to be taken into consideration. Men are also human beings. They are not creatures who do not really feel anything just because they've been taught from childhood that you need to act strong, you need to be strong, you're not supposed to shed tears in front of anybody. Tears is a sign of weakness. We really need to cross all these barriers, and yeah, I'm really glad people are speaking more and more about this. And I really hope to see a lot of change coming around. And yeah, I mean, people like Deepika are doing a great work. So
Every day.
yeah, let's just hope for a good future. Let's hope for a lot of changes, and let's hope for a lot of awareness.
Yeah, 2021, baby. Yes, it's going to be a lot of change. So I want to end this conversation by thanking our panelists, Isha, Deepika, and Parth, for sharing their stories and engaging us in this discussion. I want to thank our audience for all of the questions and all of the participation. If you guys have any comments, any comments about these conversations or any other topic that you would like to see upcoming, please let me know. Send me an email or hit me up on Instagram. Our next conversation is on December 3rd, and it's the topic of Indian pride. And for this conversation, we're going to be live on Facebook, YouTube, and Zoom. Also, please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe and turn on the notifications. And that's it from now. That's it. That's all from me. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Love and abundance, everybody. Thank you, panelists. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Varun. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Have a great
Thanks,
day.
Varun.
Thank you.